There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Joshua. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. Now, after this Passover, we have here Joshua, and he's walking around, and he's contemplating, well, how are we going to take Jericho? Because he doesn't have a plan, and he hasn't been given any instructions of what's going to be happening in the next few days. So he's at Jericho, and he sees a man, and he's never seen this man before. And this man, he not only has a sword, but his sword is drawn. And so Joshua, he doesn't immediately think this is a friend. And Joshua, he's alone, and he's probably startled. And we're told here that Jericho is all locked up. And so I would think that he's probably assuming that this man is from Jericho. But before he attacks him, Joshua shows some wisdom, because his initial thought would not be, oh, wow, this is God in human form. He's probably thinking he's going to have to fight this guy. And so he asks him, he says, are you a friend or foe? And the man refuses to answer Joshua's question. And he just says, no, because this person doesn't have a side. And then all the man does is identify himself, and he says, no, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. And he uses the name Yahweh. And so this commander's allegiance is to Yahweh. It's to God. It's not to men. And he's not just a commander, but he's a commander of angels, the Lord's army. And so Joshua, he immediately falls before him, and he worships him, and he calls him Lord. And he asks him for instructions of what he wants to say to him. And the reason that Joshua didn't recognize him is because Joshua had never seen him before. And this is what is known in the Bible as a Christophany. And some people, they just call it a theophany. But this is one of those pre-incarnate appearances of Jesus Christ, where incarnate, it just means flesh, like carne asada. And we've seen a few of these in the Bible, where God had appeared to Abraham before Sodom was destroyed in Genesis 26:24. And he also appeared to Isaac this way. And he also appeared to Jacob when he wrestled with Jacob before Jacob met with his brother Esau. But we never read of God appearing to Moses this way. But this angel, it also appeared to Balaam's donkey, and it appeared to the donkey in the same exact manner as he is here, where with Balaam's donkey, he also appeared with his sword drawn. And one way to know that this is an appearance of Jesus and not just an angel of the Lord is that you never see any of God's angels ever allowing men to worship him. And then the commander of the Lord's army says to Joshua the very same thing that the angel of the Lord said to Moses, which was that voice from the burning bush at Mount Sinai in Exodus 3:4. And he says, take your sandal off your foot. The place that you stand is holy. And so even though Joshua had a question, the question here really is to Joshua. And it's really, well, whose side are you on, Joshua? And Joshua, he's probably very pleased to know there's another commander besides him. And it's a commander that outranks him, the one who's really in charge. So Joshua, he is really only second in command. And that's how it is for any leader in the church. The most you can ever be is second in command. That's the only way for any church to be successful. And anywhere that the Lord is, any ground where he stands is holy ground. And so now we start chapter 6, and before we're told what the Lord told Joshua, we hear that Jericho is securely shut up. And Jericho, it wasn't an exceptionally large city, but it was a fortress. And if Israel can defeat this city, they can defeat anything in Canaan. But before Joshua and Israel can conquer anything in the promised land, they themselves had to be conquered by God. And it's only because of God's wisdom that they're facing Jericho first. Because it's not like they're trying to work their way up to Jericho by trying to take on a few of the smaller cities. It's not like the playoffs where you kind of work your way up to play the harder teams. And really here, this isn't Israel defeating Jericho anyways. This is really God defeating Jericho. There is no human wisdom about this battle at all. They're using absolutely no military intelligence. There's no surprise attack. And all those events that we read in chapter 5, those would have taken Israel at least 10 days to complete. And so if you take those 10 days and then you add to that the circling of Jericho for 7 days, that means that it's going to be over 17 days in the land until Jericho will be taken. And so that whole purpose of chapter 5 was for them to become spiritually prepared. And you have to remember, Jericho knew that they were there the whole time. So this really is the Lord's battle. And so the whole thing for Israel here is a test. It's a test as if they will listen to God and obey him, then victory is assured. And everything that the Lord has told Joshua to do, it sounds crazy. It sounds like there's some kind of strange cult, just making a bunch of circles and then going back to their camp. But this is total obedience to God, no matter what he tells them to do. And this is just Israel making themselves totally dependent on God and not leaning on their own understanding. So this is the believing of God's promises. And here Israel is not fighting for victory. They are fighting from victory because Jericho has already been given to them if they obey. And that's how all our battles as Christians are to be won, because we too are always fighting from victory. All we have to do is to believe God's promises and to obey him, because it's just like what Jesus said in John 16:33, where he said, "Be of good cheer." And he told us that he has already overcome the world. And God here, he doesn't ask Israel to do anything great. He doesn't ask them to do anything hard. And that's because this is only a test. They only just have to obey whatever he says, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. So God's not asking anyone to climb the walls or to carry any heavy equipment around to knock the walls down. They just have to obey. And that's what you'll see throughout the whole scriptures. God never asks anyone to do anything too difficult for them. He only asks them to believe him, and he only asks them for their obedience to what he says. And so they're not to look at the difficult task that's before them. All they're to do is to look at God himself. And so what you see here, they never take the ark of God before them in battle. The priests weren't usually the ones to go first in Israel's battles. But here it's just like crossing the Jordan. They were to keep their minds on God, and they were to watch and follow God. They were to follow the ark. And no one has ever conquered a city this way before. And then every day they marched, you have to realize they were open to attack from Jericho because Jericho had these high positions from their walls. And then here, when Israel marched around the city, it probably wasn't with all of their people. And it probably wasn't even with all their enlisted men from their army, because that would have taken them too long. Because we know from the census taken by Moses that there was over 600,000 men. But without those walls for Jericho's protection, it wouldn't have taken that many people to rush in and to take over Jericho. And if they did use too many men, those men would have been falling all over each other. Because you have to realize, Jericho is only 8 to 9 acres in size inside of the walls. And so it probably would have only taken these men only about a half an hour to 45 minutes to walk around that city. All right, so now we have this small group of men all armed for battle, and they're going to be followed by these 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets. And with those 7 priests, with the 7 trumpets, they're to be in front of the Ark of the Covenant and the people that are carrying the Ark. And then the Ark is to be followed by a rear guard of another group of armed men. And so what does this look like? What does this look like? This looks like a parade. And Jericho here, they're going to be entertained for 6 days by Israel, giving them a parade. And then after the parade, they're going to go back home. They're going to go back to their camp. And you can imagine this. And I don't know what kind of songs that the priests played on their trumpets, but it must have seemed not only odd to Israel, but it must have seemed very strange to Jericho. And then having 600,000 men, well, you would think that there would have been a lot of those men, because of the large number of men in their army, that they just wanted to attack Jericho, try to overwhelm them and to get it over with, and rushing upon them on the walls and then building these ramparts to breach the walls and just to be done with it all. And that was probably what Jericho was expecting. But instead, day after day, they just watch this crazy parade, and they're wondering, well, what kind of psychological warfare is this? But whatever it was, Jericho was frightened enough where they never made any attempts to come and fight, and they never made any attempts to flee. In this army, they weren't to say a word. It's just supposed to be this blowing of trumpets. And the trumpets here used, they were called shofars. And shofars are trumpets that are made out of these ram's horns. Shofar trumpets, ram's horn trumpets, they weren't used for war. The trumpets that were used for war were silver trumpets. Ram's horn trumpets are the kind of trumpets that are blown at religious feasts and festivals. And another name for the shofar is jobel, and that's where we get that word jubilee. And so with these trumpets, Israel here is not calling the people to go into battle against Jericho. What they are doing is they're just proclaiming jubilee. Or in other words, Israel is proclaiming liberty. And what they're doing is they're just announcing that Israel is in the land and they're taking possession of what's been given to them by God. And so Israel marching around the city on the first day, they probably didn't know what to expect. And they wondered, will they attack us if they march?
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.